Is the European Union pitting itself directly against the new President of the United States by signing a massive investment deal with China, despite that country's record on human rights abuses? Well, Joe Biden wants pressure put on China when the EU appears to be doing just the opposite. This is Roundtable. Hello from me, David Foster. So why would the European Union do this? Is it purely economic, or is the strategy not to isolate China and work quietly for change? Both sides hailed the investment agreement signed in December as a major development in relations. But there is a long way to go, according to the EU leader, Ursula von der Leyen. The deal has to be signed off by MEPs and member states, and that might not happen until next year. But will it happen at all? Civil society organisations have written to EU chiefs outlining concerns over human rights. There's been growing criticism of the treatment of the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang and a new national security law imposed in Hong Kong. US President Joe Biden hopes to work with the European Union to counter China. The EU is eager to cooperate with the new administration in the United States, but there may be limits to how far it's willing to go against China. Much is yet to be decided. So what is really going on between these two power players, the European Union and China? Let us kick off the conversation. We go to Belgium, to Ghent to be precise, and we see there Hu, Weinian Research Fellow at the Centre for European Policy Studies, that is in Brussels. We go to the UK, Canterbury to be precise again. Kerry Brown, we welcome back, Professor of Chinese Studies and Director of the Lao China Institute at King's College London. And then Jan Bennett, our final guest in New Jersey in the United States, Assistant Director of the Paul and Marcia Wythes Center on Contemporary China at Princeton University. The rules are we just kick around a few ideas. We try and find out what is going on here. So, Kerry, let me ask you first of all, who's got the better deal here? The European Union or China?
Well, I mean, there's two questions. One is who's got the better deal politically, and then who's got the better deal economically. Politically, I think it's China because it's isolated after COVID-19, so it needed something like this. It's a bit of a coup because basically it means that China can say to the United States, we're not completely isolated, and the European Union is a big, big partner. Economically, it's hard to say. It's meant to open up some of the more protected sectors, financial services, healthcare, these kind of things for European investment. At the moment, European investment stocks into China are about the same as Chinese stocks of investment into the European Union, although the Chinese stocks have been falling a bit recently. So that's the kind of figure we have to watch. Will these be going up? Will it be really win-win? Or will, in fact, one go up more than another and seem to sort of lead to a kind of asymmetrical deal?
So perhaps China's got the best deal politically. It's been brought into a massive club. It's not entirely isolated. Has it had to give up very much beyond vague promises about labour reform?
Well, I mean, the European Union has been criticised pretty savagely by some MEPs about the terms of the deal. The timing is not great. The problem is that this deal was really muted in 2013. So it's a bit retrospective because it could have happened any time between then and now. In 2013, this would have probably been a decent deal. And now, well, the whole context has changed. I think, the kind of commitment rhetorically to observing labour standards for China being able to join the International Labour Organization or at least subscribe to their terms, well, it's rhetoric. It's got to be backed up by action. And I'm sceptical that that will happen.
Okay, let's put that one to Jan. Is China simply paying lip service to reforms, or will it be held to pretty rigorous standards when it comes to, for example, forced labour from prison camps?
I would have to agree with Kerry that I think, in theory, this agreement levels the playing field for EU companies operating in China. It creates greater market access for them. Um, but in practice, China has a very bad record of adhering to international agreements. So it would be up to the EU to enforce the terms of this agreement and enforce compliance. I frankly don't think they will be able to.
Okay, so let's specifically, what have they promised that they will do? What has the EU said you've got to change in order for this agreement to go through?
So, what the EU has asked China to do in this agreement, and which hasn't been signed yet, is to remove protectionist policies that shelter Chinese companies from foreign competition, for example. It creates greater market access for EU companies operating in the Chinese domestic market. It will lift JV requirements for some sectors, mostly service industries. And also, in doing so, it would offer greater IP protections against forced technology transfers, something that the United States has been advocating for with the trade war. But in all actuality, if this agreement is signed, if it would be incumbent upon the EU to enforce compliance. And China has a very good record of actually violating terms of agreements. If you look at the WTO, for example, if you look at the UN Law of the Sea as another example, it's violated the terms of those treaties quite regularly. So the fact that China has this record of noncompliance, I think, is a forecast of what will happen with this agreement.
Okay, Weinian, let's bring you into the conversation. The suggestion is that China will ignore any moves to make it reform its labor market, to use forced labor, to use prisoners, etc. Do you have any confidence that China will actually say, okay, we're going to change?
Yes, I should think so because let's say for China to ratify the core ILO Convention on forced labor, for the time being that prison labor is still legitimate under its criminal penal system. However, in 2013, China already abolished the labor camp through re-education. So that's a good foundation for leading towards a complete abolishment of prison labor. I think that's promising.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you
and
here.
On the,
I'm going to stop you because
yes,
I want to check something I thought you just said. You said China has abolished labor camps.
Yes, before 2013, in China's criminal penal system, there is this prison system and re-education system, two systems.
But they are
And
one
in
and the same
2000,
because they are saying they're re-educating the Uyghurs. This is in Xinjiang province, when in fact what they're doing is perhaps indoctrinating them and make them work prison labor. They say one thing, they do something else.
For that, I'm actually do not particularly follow this Xinjiang camp, but I think that's probably through. It's possible that re-education again or through kind of camp. It's possible, but I should think that's a bigger commitment for China to commit to say that they will abolish, they will rectify this forced labor ILO convention. So I think that's a bigger commitment for China to be up to this labor standards under trade-related sustainable development.
You take China at its word. That it won't be using prison labor here. We will have to wait and see. I wonder, Kerry, if there's any means of checking whether that's true. Not you or me to check, but those people who are trying to hold China to account when it comes to this deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crucial question. What we find with the World Trade Organization and other big deals is there's the sort of letter of the law and the spirit of the law. You could argue that China is punctilious in following the letter of the law, but there's the spirit of the law, and that's really where the issue has been with the United States. There's a lack of reciprocity. The European Union in 2019 issued a communication from the Commission on its strategic views of China, where it said that China was a strategic competitor. And that is a change, I guess, from a decade before when it was really looking at engagement with China in order to create a China which was more like the European Union. So it's given up, I think, on the idea of creating an entity like it in terms of values. I mean, that's kind of reasonable. What you've got to really say, though, is that in terms of an understanding of the kind of labor law in China and the complexities of that, it's possible that China could observe the letter of disagreement. It's very broad, but it's the spirit of it. And what's crucial there, which is not really kind of clear at the moment because the deal has only just really been set up or clarified, is how this is going to be kind of observed. You know, how two sides are going to basically regulate this deal, and what kind of body are they going to do to use arbitration. That will be absolutely key for its credibility.
What about the conflict? Let's go back to Weinian, because I did butt in a little bit. What about conflict between the European Union and the United States? What is the issue here?
Oh, the issue is that before the deal was concluded, even in principle, the U.S. Incoming National Security Advisor said something that the U.S. would welcome the chance of consultation and transparency. This is not new, and we see that in the EU-US specific negotiation objectives in January 2019, they already put this request as a general provision. And but I should think that this is also a moment of EU's open strategic autonomy, where the EU will pursue decisively its own interest. And for my view on the deal, I should think that the EU has achieved its negotiating objectives in terms of market access, in terms of a level playing field, on SOE's conduct, on industrial subsidy transparency, as well as on sustainable development for technology transfer.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm going to go to Jan because I want to talk about the differences between the European Union and the United States here. Has the fact that, in the eyes of some, the European Union acted cynically, pragmatically, if you like, and sort of saying, well, look, you know, these things happen, but we'll sign a deal and we'll accept China's word that they are going to reform. Whereas the United States is a much more skeptical about it. Has that driven a wedge already between the new presidency, Joe Biden, and the European Union, do you think?
Well, the Trump administration has come out and said they were less than happy with this agreement. For the Biden administration, they've been a little bit more reticent about what they're saying about this agreement. Yes, technically it could drive a wedge between the EU and the United States. However, this agreement is bringing China into the community, the international community, and international norms regarding labor and the environment and free market access, right? So in theory, this is a good agreement, regardless of the participants. The United States.
Well, unless you happen to be a Uyghur or somebody else
yes,
in China who's being made to do this.
I did want to mention that it's been very well documented that China's Uyghur camps are still ongoing. This is the largest mass internment of a minority since World War II. China's use of prison labor in commerce is well documented. There's a recent book on this. It's called Made in China. It's written by Amelia Pang that follows the life of one of these prison laborers. So there's a lot of evidence that China engages in these practices.
Will the United States be more prepared to hold China to account for those abuses than the European Union, it having signed a deal that it gets a great deal out of?
Well, I think this is an opportunity for the United States and the EU to operate together, right? To ask China to comply with these international norms on labor and the environment as well. So I don't see it as a negative. I think this is an opportunity for both of these two allies to work together, especially in working with China that has a history of non-compliance.
Kerry, is that the way you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Biden presidency is likely to have a very different tone. And I mean, if it's Kurt Campbell who is going to be dealing with the East Asian area, which I think is kind of very likely, or maybe even confirmed now, then, you know, his attitude was always a very pragmatic one. You've got to make a choice, right? You either don't deal with China at all, or you deal with China despite being very aware of the challenges. And that's been the position not just now, but for, you know, the last 2, 3, or 4 decades, really. So I think, this is the EU has been arguing for a long time that it needs more reciprocity, it needs better bilateral deals and access. This delivers the possibility for that. And of course, it's going to mean, hopefully, a deeper dialogue. That will probably mean that some companies are going to have to review their operations in China if they deal with cotton, for instance, or ketchup, or things like this, anything that is likely to be sourced in Xinjiang, which cannot demonstrate it doesn't involve enforced labor, is going to have to be very, I mean, that's very problematic. That isn't, palatable. But I mean, there's all sorts of areas where one can work legitimately in China and should work legitimately in China. And this arrangement hopefully will mean that those areas should increase.
Okay, let's talk about it from the perspective of the European Commission. We're going to hear now from Ursula von der Leyen, who's the president of the Commission.
We see that our investors just face too many barriers in these key sectors. And for us, with market access, it's not a question of meeting halfway, but it's a question of rebalancing the asymmetry and a question of openness of our respective markets. We expect that the market access barriers in China will be removed, especially for future and emerging digital technologies. They are the core of our economies.
But is it, Weinian, really a level playing field when we see massive amounts of European money going into China, and a lot of it, most of it, in fact, is from Germany, and it wants to sell its cars there? This is about German interests rather than the interests of the whole of the European Union, perhaps.
Actually, a level playing field in the context of the agreement is about SOE's conduct based on commercial considerations and no discriminatory treatment against other market players, and unforced technology transfer where market access market shouldn't be for technology, as well as freedom for contract and the protection of IP rights. And also in terms of industrial
but in the broader sense,
transparency.
In the broader sense, perhaps Germany's getting a better deal out of this than other countries, and that may well be why Angela Merkel was so keen for it to go through.
That's actually pretty possible, because I noticed that there's a bigger opening up on the new vehicle sector, where a new vehicle sector is one of the 10 key sectors of that Made in China 2025, where also China since 2009, its new vehicle market is already the world's biggest market. So I think, and now the equity cap of joint venture is lifted, and China's investment law also says that foreign companies will have the same national treatment as domestic ones.
Kerry, is that why Angela Merkel is so keen on this? Because if you look at her background, she comes from East Germany. She knows about repression. Therefore, she might have sympathy with some of the repressive practices of the Chinese authorities. Is she looking at this simply from a German nationalistic point of view? We get a great deal out of this.
I think that's possibly partly true, but I also think that she's always had a very pragmatic view towards China in her 16 years as Chancellor. She's been one of the most frequent European visitors. A British Prime Minister, when we were part of the European Union, we didn't really go very often. French presidents go relatively frequently, but really the German Chancellorship is the one that has gone the most. And so I think her attitude to China is a pragmatic one. It's clear that there are very significant, kind of German companies like Volkswagen that have a lot to gain from this deal if they get it right. But I just want to make one really key point. A deal, when it's signed, opens up the field for people to do stuff in. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do that stuff, because they might not have the knowledge or the capacity to do so. It could be an excellent deal, this. It could be a really amazing deal. But there are probably not many European companies with the knowledge, the ability, the approach strategically to go into China, because it's still a difficult place to operate in. And so that's going to be where the infrastructure really matters. To have companies to be able to play on this field, you've got to prepare them. my kind of guess is that Chinese companies are probably more willing and more prepared to come into Europe now than Europeans are to go into China. That's an incredible change from 20 years ago.
Okay, well, we'll have to wait and see. Do you think it'll go through, by the way? Do you think it'll get voted through in Europe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will, because it's a delivery on a promise. I mean, the political opposition to it is kind of well stated, but I think that it's in the interests of the people who have an interest in it going through are more than the people that would want to oppose it.
Because these things are always so intricately, well, they're bound together, aren't they? No matter what part of the world you happen to be in. We're talking about the EU and China, but I want to talk, Jan, if I may, about what Joe Biden's attitude towards China might be, because that could impact on Europe. Is he going to be quite protectionist? Is he going to be pretty tough, or is he going to try and get some kind of dialogue going?
I think he's going to want to have dialogue with China. His style will be much different from the Trump administration, but the substance of what will be negotiated between the two countries will be the same. We're talking about protection of American interests in commerce, our national security interests. So Biden's China policy, in substance, shouldn't be too different from the Trump administration. I think the manner in which he will conduct negotiations and talks with China will be very, very different. If you look at his lineup, his foreign policy lineup, it's very good. They have a lot of experience. So I think Biden will have a different approach with China. But again, the substance will be the same. What you mean by leveling the playing field, it's removing these protectionist policies that shelter Chinese companies from foreign competition. Those in theory will be lifted. But the Chinese economy is very different from those of the EU and the United States, Canada, all these countries, right? So the Chinese Communist Party is going to allow foreign companies to make only so much profit, right? It will control that. If Chinese state-owned industries aren't making money, then foreign companies aren't going to make money.
Okay, but what I'm wondering,
acknowledge that.
that's from the Chinese perspective. But what about from the United States perspective? Is it going to lose out because more European goods will be made, sold in China than the United States has the possibility to do? Is the United States going to see its share fall?
Yes, especially if this trade war continues on the way it is. But this is competition. This is called, the free market system. So hopefully, we will be able to negotiate similar concessions from China through with the ongoing trade war. But that's for the Biden administration to take on. Yeah. And right now, with the pandemic going on in the United States, I don't know if this will be on the forefront of his foreign policy.
And that, Kerry, could well put the United States, Joe Biden, and the electorate's nose very much out of joint. If this doesn't work out for them, if they can't get business opportunities in China because of this EU deal, they're not going to be at all pleased.
Yeah, I mean, COVID-19 is going to obviously have a massive impact on the future economics of Europe, America, and China. At the moment, the likeliest scenario is that China grows, maybe as much as 4% next year, according to the IMF. Europe shrinks and America shrinks. I mean, that might not be the case, but that's what it looks like at the moment. Now, if the political rationale for a deal like this is that you can use the opportunities to address that shrinkage, you can say, okay, all these issues with China, but basically, we have a recession and this is giving us opportunities to grow out of it. So that justifies it from self-interest. If the deal does not deliver that kind of outcome, we have a political problem, a double-edged political problem, because not only is there the kind of fallout from the pandemic with all the political collateral from that, but also a deal has been signed, which if it looks like China is getting more from it than Europe, well, wow, that's really win-win, where China big time wins twice and the worst possible circumstances. And that's also a problem for China. It will not, I think, want that outcome really, because it's already got enough diplomatic problems without being blamed for exploiting them economically with a deal like this.
So Weinian, they will be smiling more in Beijing than they will in Brussels?
No, but I think when we talk about the EU-China investment, we should not forget the US-China Phase 1 agreement, where the US has gained lots of concessions from China. Some of them can be applied to other countries, but some of them are only on bilateral basis. For example, on insurance and on financial service sector. I remember last October, the Financial Times published an article on the Great Wall Street in China. Since the financial service sector was opened up by the Phase 1 deal, many US financial service providers are already in China buying up their joint venture Chinese partners.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to have all three of you on the programme. And from me, David Foster, to all of you who've taken the trouble to watch this edition of Roundtable, my thanks. We hope to see you next time. Until then, goodbye.